to item 9, the key projects activity update. I'll hand over to Janine. Janine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I was going to suggest we do have Nikki from IQANZ with us in the meeting in terms of independent quality assurance report that was prepared Project Reboot. So they've been patient with us while the meeting was running over, but thought we'd maybe take that report first. That probably provides a really good scene setter for an update on Project Reboot anyway. So Nikki, if you're still there. Yes?
Good morning.
Very impressed to have sound. We had technology issues in the chamber, so the fact that you're coming through loud and clear for yourself.
Fantastic. Okay, would you like me just to crack into it?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present our report. I'll take it as read that you've seen the detailed report, and then you've also got the slides that we prepared. So I'll just do a quick kind of run through. Are you getting a lot of reverb at your end? I'm just wondering. All right, that's better. You can still hear me okay? No, I can't hear you at all now. Can't hear you, sorry.
We can hear you fine.
Okay, all right, I'll keep going then. And then if anyone has any questions, hopefully I'll be able to hear you at some point. So we did the fieldwork for this review at the end of February and early March, so a few months ago now. And so the report that we produced was effectively our assessment of the project at that time. The review was really designed to provide some assurance around where the project was at, were the foundations for phase 4 robust, and how well placed was the project for future delivery success. We also looked at the technical side of things. So is the solution likely to meet business and customer needs? Are there any barriers to a successful delivery? And coming out of that, we identified areas of risk or issues that might be pertinent to project success, and had a number of recommendations that we made. You will have seen from the report that we did that we do have some significant concerns around not the technical side of the project, in the sense of, is the council going to achieve a product that will meet their needs? We weren't as concerned on that perspective. It's more about the deliverability of it within the time frame that had been indicated, which was November this year for phase 4. I'm sure you're all aware that the project has been challenged throughout its life, and that continues to be a challenging project because of those early foundations. Phase 4 is the more complex, or most complex of the phases, and so it is inherently more risky. Challenges that we were seeing at the time were around ongoing quality issues, some optimism, shall we say, in in-force planning, and significant resource constraints in key areas, including in the testing space, in some of the project management space as well. The most important thing that we considered for the project success is to have a very strong line in terms of the testing regime that the project undertakes. So fieldwork that we did identified that there were instances where releases were pushed to production without being fully tested, and so that which required mop up after go live. The risk with doing that for phase 4 is because it covers the council's a lot of the finance side of things and the integration between the two of those, letting things go into production without being fully tested creates a significant level of risk. And so our most critical recommendation was really around the project holding the line with Infor around what goes into system integration testing. So that is the end-to-end testing of the entire platform. That doesn't occur until Infor are able to provide the council with a level of confidence that they have done their testing, Infor's testing, to a degree that suggests the product hangs together end to end. So technically deliverable, quite risky. The thing that Waikato needs to do the most is to reduce the likelihood of issues which are experienced during testing going through into production. So creating that very robust testing environment. That is made more challenging, or was more challenging at the point of time of our review, in that the testing resourcing was constrained. The test lead was just leaving, and the planning for phase 4 testing was consequently impacted. So we would have expected the project to have been further ahead in test planning than it was. And we made some recommendations around engaging with a testing consultancy to help bolster some of that resource quickly, because the market was, and still is, very constrained, and so trying to find someone to contract directly to the project could take some time. And the overarching conclusion that we made is that although we feel the project is deliverable and that the council will end up with a solution that will meet your needs in the medium to long term, delivery by 2022, so November 2022, we were concerned that that was an optimistic timeline. Even with the contingency which had been, so the 3-month contingency which had been costed for, which would take us into early 2023, again, we weren't certain that that would cover enough of the work that needed to be done, given where the project was at the time in February when we did our fieldwork. The project was going through a reassessment of the phase 4 schedule with a consideration of what was deliverable to that time frame and what full delivery would look like. And I would assume that by now that work would have been done, and the project will be able to give some more confidence about a delivery date. But our expectation was it would be sometime in sort of early to mid 2023. So that is kind of our quite detailed report in a short nutshell. Happy to answer any questions or cover any areas in more detail.
Barry.
On to see if it works. You can hear me there, all right?
Yes, I can, Barry. Thank you.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes,
Good.
I can hear you. Yep.
Okay, I'll present my question. I'm interested in that comment. You said a bit more clarity about that comment about mid-2023 that you thought. I'm really interested in this phase 4. When do you think it might be achieved? If you've cast doubt that 3 months is not enough in your view, is it 6 months or is it 9 months? You know, what sort of period of time? Thank you.
It is very difficult without having seen the sort of replanning work that the project has done since to make a call on that. But my colleague Matt and I, who did the work, we thought that at least 6 months would be needed, and that was driven by what we had seen from delivery of the earlier phases and the delays that had been experienced to that point, and the risk around the level of integration that is needed for phase 4. So this phase is the first time that the entire solution will be working together, and that always brings with it risk of things not quite going to plan, and therefore bugs or defects or just weird behaviour needing to be tracked down. And that is a how long is a piece of string kind of question, because it does depend on what the nature of the issue that is found is. So I would expect probably at least 6 months.
Right.
But it's not really, I mean, I can't really give you anything more definitive than that.
Is that subject to, you've mentioned a couple of places about testing, resourcing and other resourcing. Is that subject to a change in the current pattern, or is it more resourcing to hit that 6 month date? In other words, is that subject to particular resourcing? Thanks.
So the resourcing that the project had at the point of time that we did the work in February, particularly in the testing space, was constrained because of a change in personnel. So the test lead was leaving, but the team was fairly light anyway, and there was a need for subject matter expert test resources to support the user acceptance testing, which is the final stage of testing. So with the resourcing that the project had at that point in time, I don't think that even a 6 month timeline is probably achievable, but I know that from our discussions with Tracy that the project was looking at how to increase the level of resourcing that it has in that testing space to help get through, because there's a level of work that has to be done, and there will come a point where you can't just throw more resources at it because it becomes a diminishing return. However, additional testing resource was definitely needed at that time.
Thank you. Chair, I just one follow-up comment, and that is that I think the quality of the report is very good. It gives me clarity that I mightn't have had otherwise. So thank you very much for the report.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
There we go. G'day.
Hello.
Short screen to look at. So thank you for the report. This one. I think there's some questions that we need to ask management, because I think things have moved on from your report. So yeah, so that's great. We'll talk to management about those, because I'm sure they've done something about testing. My question is about the post-implementation support, or the care, or the hypercare perhaps, as I've sometimes seen it, given to users once they've gone live. And I think that's going to be an important part of the success of the next stage. So are you able to comment on what you've seen on that to date?
Certainly. So there was a high level of positive comment from the people that we talked to around the work that the project has been doing to support the business change. So this is in the lead up to and in some of the training that had been occurring in the earlier releases. There was some challenge in that, again, from a resourcing perspective, in that the project was managing multiple streams at the same time. So we had sort of phase 2 release, I think it's phase 2 release, coming at the same time as planning for phase 4. So the change management and support resources were stretched. From an operating model, post project or post go live technical support, that support model was evolving at the time of our review. So it was work that really needed to be landed so that Waikato had a view about what the IT teams within council would be supporting versus what would then get pushed in for second or third level support. I would assume, hopefully, that has been landed since that point, given it was in train when we came in February. So there was good work happening, and there was definitely an expectation that that work would land pretty quickly in terms of what those plans would look like. And so in general, I think that's a relatively positive area for the project. I mean, we certainly in our report commented around some of the change management stuff that had been happening, was quite successful in at least preparing business for the various changes that were coming. There is I guess, a challenge in that space always, in that the overall solution will be good for council, but there will be winners and losers. It's not a term I like to use, but there will be parts of the business whose day-to-day experience is degraded initially before some enhancements and changes happen. And so the continuation of the project to work with those users to help them understand that it's a short to medium term temporary pain to get to a better position. That was all in the plans to occur as part of phase 4. But obviously that's not happening yet because phase 4 is not going live yet.
Yes, so I think that's a good answer. Thank you. And I agree with you that it's a very helpful report in terms of providing clarity. I don't think there's a lot of surprises in it for me based on history, but it's good to get this clarity. However, I think when the meeting's ready, we need to move on to see what's the consequence of this, because I gather that this is now an historical document and that quite a bit changed. And I don't know whether you stand in line to hear what's changed, but so for me, it's on to the next stage to see what management have done.
Sorry, if this is a question for me, I can't actually hear.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
So did you hear any of what I said?
Sorry, no.
Well, I complimented you. And I complimented the CFO for the courage of putting this document in front of us. And I said that I wanted to have a look at some of the elements of this report. And I want to start with the people that you spoke to. There's no commentary in here about speaking with the interface that we put between us and Infor. And I forget the gentleman's name. David? No. We had another person. What's his name? Jared.
Jared Goldman is involved from a renegotiation process last year. So it was negotiated mediator, legal advice.
Was Nikki aware of that?
I'm sure that would have come up in patients and the journey that the project's been through.
Okay. The other thing the document is silent on is the money, because it started as a $10 million project. It's now a 20-something million project, and we've been asked to fasten our seatbelts. So, in terms of next steps, I'm really nervous about giving you a blank check, because I can see millions of dollars more needed. And I'm thinking to myself, why would I give millions of dollars more to this project when I quote, product quality issues to date cast doubt on the reliability of Infor to deliver of phase 4 functionality? So Nikki hasn't been convinced that Infor is going to be able, well, she's got doubt of Infor's ability to deliver. And I'm really interested in that prepare to stop diagram, because it sort of feels to me like we are in a project where meeting the objectives, benefits within time and money and agreed quality levels are seriously at risk. That's how I've interpreted that. Throughout the report, you know, I hear commentary, the opening comments. This was a solution implementation. We were told by Osborne early on at the project reboot committee, we were told, because a couple of us were banging on about the needs analysis. We were told you don't need needs analysis. That's an old-fashioned way of doing it. We're just going to splice a whole lot of modules together and live happily thereafter. Now we're told that actually it was a product development project, and so even though a suite of modules was being put together, I'm left wondering between now and the end, what sort of actions can we take to, I'm almost reluctant to use the term needs analysis, but we have to know, I think, the sequence of events that stand between us and success. Because if we're being asked to say, well, we'll just work with Infor and we'll negotiate our way through this, I've got no truck with that. This project has not earned the right to have that degree of flexibility, in my humble opinion. And when you say, Nikki, on page 6, those tasked with governing the project were spoken to, all I saw in your list at the end of it was Asbjorn is the only one that's independent. Is that a fair comment?
Yes.
No other independent commentary from governors?
No.
Okay. So look, I think what I'm taking from this is we proceed with Infor with a new set of ground rules. And I'll be interested to hear what Tracy's got to say about how she's going to navigate her way through phase 4 with Infor, because if we do what we've always done, we're going to get what we always got. And I want to be convinced that we're going to do something fundamentally different with Infor on the basis of this report that drives some of the risk out of this project, because I can see another $2 or $3 million disappearing here. I just, you know, I don't want the next incoming council to have to grapple with this like we did when it was the first decision we made. And then it was 11 million going to 13 and we were nervous. So, you know, I just think this would not withstand the front page of the Dominion sniff test. We're given very powerful insights here on why we need to change the way we're managing. So I guess I want to know, how are we going to change? I mean, I've never been shown the Moscow list, and I don't know what the won't haves were that were considered. For example, I'm assuming that's what the W means on a Moscow list. You know, how can we know if we didn't do a detailed needs analysis that the business requirements were shared, the business requirements that are referred to on page 25, how can we take some comfort that we know what those business requirements were if we didn't do a needs analysis? Do you see what I'm asking? So I'm sorry, Janine, I'm all over the place. In summary, I'm very nervous about giving you more dough for this unless you guys can convince us that you're going to behave differently, and we know with a reasonable degree of clarity what it's going to cost and what you're going to do differently. I think those would be my comments. Now, what do I turn off, Ting?
So perhaps if I can start with a little bit of a response to that and get Tracy to add to it. Nikki, can you hear okay?
Yes, I can. Thanks, Janine.
For me, I think as people have commented on the quality of the report that we received, and the timing of that has been extraordinarily beneficial for us. And the clarity, I think, of the recommendations that have come through. And so this report has provided a little bit of a guidance document for how we engage moving forward and the key areas that we really need to focus on. And this report has been shared with Infor as well. So they have the findings, warts and all, and our responses to that as well. So we haven't kept this to ourselves, we have shared with them. There were a few areas that were called out in particular, and probably if I start with the resourcing one, so there was testing, project management, resourcing, and finance SMEs were called out as well. So we have just appointed a testing lead, so we have somebody on contract for that now, just in place over the last couple of weeks. And we have also been out to market with an RFP for further testing resources to support that process. I think the outcome from that RFP is still probably a concern in terms of the quality of resources that are available within the current market, but it is absolutely an area that has been picked up and will be an area of cost driver for us as well, because we need to do it well, and that will have a price tag associated with it. From a project management perspective, while we haven't got another project manager in to support Tracy, we have now got a project coordinator in to provide some extra arms and legs around, hopefully clearing Tracy's plate a little bit of some of those administrative tasks, which means that she has a clearer focus on the important work that she needs to do. And around the finance SME, I have talked with Neil Tunnell, I think Neil's on the call anyway, around seconding him into the project for a 12-month period to actually provide that business knowledge in, but then also to be able to come out of the project and bring that with him back into the business at the end of it. So we're in the process of recruiting for a 12-month backfill for his substantive role to support that. So I guess those are some of the key areas in terms of resourcing. I think from an overall approach perspective, the points that have really resonated are, again, coming back to that testing and the readiness for testing and the gating of that testing. And so that has been a really key discussion with Infor around what are the criteria for entering those different testing cycles, and clearly communicating that without meeting those, we're not actually accepting. So I think, we have taken an approach through the project previously of we've been keen to get things happening, so we'll take a bit and we'll do what we can, and then we'll do a bit more. I've been pretty insistent with the team of no, let's look at what it's going to take us to actually do this properly. Look at our guidance document and what does that mean in terms of doing it properly around entering those different testing stages. That means time, and that's, I guess, the consequence of it, and what Nikki's been telling us. So we have previously, I think the last time we presented formally to the committee, we were talking about the work that had been done that was indicating May 2023 as a revised go live date. With subsequent conversations and recommendations that have come to me from both an Infor and a WRC perspective, which is really around complexity and risk with data migration for our property and rating area, is around a July 2023 go live. So, I think those reflections around November 2022 wasn't going to be the case. At least a 6-month extension, that's what we are seeing coming back through the work that's been done subsequent and reflecting the findings in the review. In terms of quality and Infor quality that's been called out, I think, again, there were a lot of things that I would probably say on Infor's part that were acknowledged when we went through the renegotiation last time, and that was around product maturity in terms of the overall solution and the acknowledgement that this was new in terms of the overall solution, and so that maturity and some of the quality and rework as well. So that was acknowledged through that process and through some of the financial arrangements that were agreed through that time. The optimism on their part, I think, again, we have talked about that and the conversations that we are having through the relationship management group, so project managers, project directors, is the need for absolute honesty and calling a spade a spade. So if it's not November, tell us it's not November. That's okay. Not okay. But we need to have that honesty in those conversations in order to be able to respond. So, sorry, that was going to be a quick overview by me, probably a somewhat lengthier one, but Tracy, whether there's anything that you want to add to that as well.
Thanks, Janine. I think just to add, perhaps to speak to some of.
Are you on?
Can you hear me?
Are you on James? And yeah, just it goes lovely. Perfect.
Yep. You can hear me all right, Nikki? Cool. Perhaps just to add to a couple of your comments there, Janine, thank you, and to speak to some of your points, some McPherson. So in terms of the testing approach, as Nikki's pointed out, and as has been discussed, we are looking at additional resource in that space. And we're also, going back here, sorry. We're also looking further at our entry criteria into before we start SIT. We've spent a lot of work with Infor clarifying the entry criteria that we have had in place from the beginning of the project. But as Janine pointed out, we have at times taken a time versus risk approach to enter into a testing cycle when perhaps we could have paused. But in terms of moving forward, what we've done with Infor is clarify crystal clear with Infor what our entry criteria is for SIT, and at the same time taken an approach where we've taken for a couple of modules a early release to do some more systems testing, more functionality testing, so that we can get our hands on it quicker and identify any particular issues, which was one of the things we spoke with IQANZ about as well. So we have that in place. As part of the replanning, we are still working through with Infor. We have replanned. As Janine's pointed out, we are now going through what does a shift to a July go live look like and what's the activities that lead us to there. So we're just reviewing that in finer detail with Infor at the moment. And then as part of that, taking a step back to do a further risk assessment across the whole of the program. That's where we are at the moment.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions. I'll ask the first 2 because they're linked. There was comment in the report about testing that we were undertaking that the report suggested that Infor should be involved in the testing. Is there now, to what degree, the first question is, to what degree should Infor be party to the testing? And the second part of that question, is there clarity on the demarcation boundary between who pays us or Infor for that testing? So that's the first bit.
Okay, so in terms of the entry criteria into systems integration testing, for us to start testing, there are a number of elements, but 2 to call out specifically, Councillor Quayle, Chair, is that we have construction completion and Infor provision of their confirmation of the testing that they've undertaken. So Infor are required to unit test anything that they have specifically built or extended or our integrations. So there are areas of the product that have been, as we've talked about previously, specifically configured for us or extended for us. As part of the handover process, Infor are to provide their effectively proof of that testing. So we have that as one of our entry criteria. That has been in the past with previous phases, again with that view of risk versus time that we were taking, we've merged some of that activity. So we now have that much clearer in terms of our process. In terms of who pays, we have in the contract agreements in place in relation to expected level of quality that we can call on, and we have in the past, but we can call on that as part of those contractual arrangements if necessary.
And my third question was more general one. This report, right at the outset, said it didn't focus on the whether the product suited the regional council's needs. So my question now is, given where we're at, are the staff convinced, and to what degree, that the product will meet our needs and will move us to a system that is have a 15-year life, which is what we're talking about. So I want to get an understanding, and maybe to help that, it would be useful, because it's broken up into modules, so it'd be useful for record here to say module such and such, yes, we really think that's up to scratch, and module 2 and so on. So if you just go through, that'll give us a real clear picture of where we're at in terms of the quality of the modules suiting our purpose, and that they have a 15-year life. So just a comment on that. Thank you.
So if I make a start and just work through sequentially how what we've deployed to date. So our first cab off the rank was around our budgeting and planning tool, so DEPM, and that was used in part for the LTP process, but used in full for the annual plan. I think that system is being used quite successfully. Probably the bit that's yet to be resolved is really around the reporting outputs from that. But it has enabled us to shift from a finance-centric budgeting process to be able to actually push that responsibility out to budget managers in the organisation, which was a key objective for that. So that has been achieved. We'll come back to that because DEPM is part of the overall reporting solution as well. And so reporting is probably a slightly different topic, but we're not there yet. From a global HR perspective, again, that is in broad use across the organisation. So every staff member in the organisation actually has a touch point with that in terms of just their sort of employee life cycle management. From my perspective, and Chris can talk to it because he gets to play with global HR too, with a little bit of oversight, that has been well picked up and pretty intuitive to use. You know, it was one area where I think from the people and capability team, particularly in the learning and development space, there were some early concerns around that. But I think as we have worked through subsequent releases of that software, that is bedding in terms of a useful tool from a business as usual. Asset management is the latest one to go live. Tracy, you might be in a better place to talk about that than I am.
Yep, certainly. So asset management. So this is the tool that supports the integrated catchment management team. It includes our actual asset management back office tool and our field voice, sort of the field inspector, the in-field tool that's used. You may recall from previous updates that we had some challenges going into our go live with the field inspector tool stability. They were resolved for go live, and we've been continuing to work with Infor on increased improvements in that space, with an update delivered there in April. I think that the work that's been done to date with our transition to BAU review for that phase, which includes a review and a recap of expected benefits realisation, is that those benefits will be realised. They will just take time to realise. So at this stage, yes, that functionality is implemented and in use. We've also just recently implemented the piece that's related to the financial transactions and asset register. That was also delayed because Infor needed to do further work in that space. But that was deployed at the end of May and is currently in use.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if I might be able to just add a little bit of commentary to what's been said. So from my perspective and overview of where Reboot's got to and is going, in the planning space, I think what you've heard from Janine enables more integrated planning across the organisation, which we hadn't been able to achieve before. Notwithstanding, there's a little bit of, I think, work to do to get it really up to where we want it to be. In the HR, global HR space, what I hear from Nick is we're able to do measurement and reporting we didn't used to be able to do. And I hear him sometimes saying it's just so nice being able to get some information at the click of a button now. So I think that we've made a big stride in that space and towards what we've been hoping to achieve with it. My understanding of the asset management space that Tracy was just referring to from Greg is that it's actually working well functionally for staff in the field. We can do recording and save time in ways we haven't been able to do before. We can actually do a whole lot more than we couldn't do before, and I think that's going to be a realisation that will be a big benefit. I think, Greg, the last thing that Tracy just said, the integration of the financials is where a real big benefit is yet to come, which I think is just going live at the moment, because that's going to save a lot of administrative time in terms of some of the financial requirements in his team. And I think the other one that you'll probably refer to, Janine, is where the finance, the last piece, which is going as well.
Yeah, and so in terms of phase 4, I was going to say it's almost a game of two halves, but it's probably 3/3. So 3 elements to finance. So there's the core financial product, which from an accounts payable supply perspective is, I hear really good feedback actually from the team on both the product, but actually the process that they've worked through that has helped them get a better understanding of the overall process that we apply than they have probably ever had before. So that's around the level of engagement that those staff have had in that. From a property and rating perspective, that was an area where potentially we were going to face quite high change resistance because it was the area of Oracle EBS that was really a bespoke development for us. And so anything that the team wanted was effectively developed for them in that application. But again, the uptake of that has been really positive. Obviously, there's some key areas of functionality that Infor are having to work on as part of that solution, but the uptake there has been really positive, particularly against that background of potential change resistance. I think the area of difficulty that we've faced with phase 4 is really around the billing solution. So the CDR model that we talk about. And that's a module that's used with Watercare in Auckland. So they use all of their billing, they do all of their billing through it. I think for us though, we don't just have one type of billing. There's a lot of complexity. So that's been the area of particular challenge, and added challenge, I think, because of the availability of well qualified expert and for resources in that space for us. One of the other call outs that I'd probably make in terms of success stories as part of this solution is actually our rates modelling tool. So the bit that links property information with our budget and our rates revenue requirements to understand what that actually looks like. It's the thing that sets our rate factors we use for doing all of our rates modelling. The staff have been really excited by what they've seen coming out through the work that's happened there. And while we won't get there immediately, it is Janine's idea of being able to sit in a council meeting and be working through an annual plan conversation with councillors. We can update the budget. We can see that calculation running through to some sort of GIS visualisation of those rating impacts. That's a little bit of a leap, but it's actually, Tracy's laughing, it's probably a huge leap. But the functionality to get from the budget through to the rating impacts of it is integrated within the one application at the moment, which is something that we don't have. So with rates being legislatively challenging from a compliance perspective, if we've got all of that set up and configuration done correctly, then it actually all just happens. So look, absolutely acknowledge the challenges of the project, but I think it's also important to acknowledge that there have been a number of wins to date, and we are seeing the benefit for the investment that's been made so far.
Chair, just to round out that question, so we've heard from staff, the CEO and the CFO, that there's lots of improvements. When we started out, there was an expectation of where we might end up. So what I want to know is, at this point, is there things which have fallen off that expectation, or are you on track to realise all those expectations? So if you like an overall, where do you think we're at compared with what we wanted to achieve at the outset? Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's no items that really stand out for me off the top of my head of areas of benefit that we wouldn't still be on track to realise. I guess what we have faced is obviously longer duration project, which is delayed when those benefits will come. A key area of benefit has always been around that integration of the asset management and financial information, so that we can move from a reactive maintenance space to proactive. Now, that's not something that happens overnight, but I think that is where some of the real gold from an integrated solution will come.
Can you hear me, Nikki? Yeah, I'd say she can.
Yes, yeah, I can.
But what I heard the chairman ask, there's two comments I'd make. The first is, let's remind ourselves we've spent 20 million. If we're not all singing and dancing about what we've produced, it's a pretty sad day. You should be able to walk into this building and there should be palpable excitement about this wonderful new tool, because we've just spent 20 million. And maybe I'm smoking something abnormal or something, but $20 million is a serious wedge of dough. Let's remind ourselves, it's a serious wedge of dough. Excuse me. My question really is around the needs analysis. Are you sure? Because what I heard you ask is, going from here to finishing phase 4, are we comfortable that we know exactly the needs or benefits or whatever you want to call it are, and that I'm assuming that Moscow list is so watertight that going forward we'll be able to ask you to show us the Moscow list and we'd see everything you want on there. So there'll be no surprises, no creep in terms of what we want. So that's nailed down. And if that's nailed down, the only doubt in my mind is Nikki's commentary that she doesn't think that M4 are up to delivering for us in phase 4. Well, you've said you've got a new lead and you've got some headcount coming in to manage the project and help Tracy. I'm trying to understand, which is where I thought Barry was going with his question, what are the risks that we haven't nailed down all the needs between now and then therefore haven't nailed down what this is likely to cost? Because no one's talking about money in this room, and it disturbs me, because these aren't small amounts of money between now and the end of the project.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I guess I did try to acknowledge that. I acknowledge it's difficult to have a conversation where we're talking about extended project duration without being able to have the conversation on the numbers. I'm waiting still for that information to come through from Infor. I had given them the grace of last week because I was on leave to come back hopefully this week with some information. Sorry, I had taken Barry's question around the benefits realisation that will come from delivery of the project, which is different to the need going into why are we making the changes. It's what's it going to pay back for us. From my perspective, in terms of the scope of the project, we have there has been no change in scope to the project throughout the duration, and I think we're at the point now where we very clearly understand what the requirements for phase 4 are, and it's a case of being able to deliver to those. I think we're really clear, and I think Infor are probably equally as clear around what that is. The question is what it takes to successfully deliver to those.
I'll take it. No more questions, and well, I won't say people are happy, but we have an understanding of where this thing's going.
This is an outstanding paper.
Oh, it is.
Chair, could we go back to Janine and see if she's got any? She's now heard the response to her report that we've got some project support. Nikki. Sorry, I got all the names mixed up. I don't know if you can hear me or not. I've tried to.
Yes, I can.
On.
I can hear you.
So any response, Nikki, because you've heard that we've got some extra project support, that we've got a testing lead. You will probably know how hard it is to get testers, but eventually we'll get there. We believe we've got the scope tied down, which is kind of important. And we're now looking to push the delivery out to the period that you thought plus a little bit. So have you got any feedback from the conversation?
I think it's, overall, I think it's positive that the project has moved forward in some of those areas that we had recommended, particularly in the resourcing space. And it's good to have got to that point, like you said, given the challenges in the market. So that's excellent. I just really wanted to pick up on a point that Councillor McPherson was making around the cost of this project. And this is a fundamentally different project than what was originally business cased. And that is part of the reason why it is costing significantly more than was originally anticipated, because you have not just bought an off-the-shelf product, you have bought the product expertise from Infor to put together a product for you that has not been put together before. And so, yes, it is costing a lot of money, but based on our experience, it is not costing significantly more or out of the ballpark than a product development type project would cost. The comparison that you've got, though, is the original concept, which was an off-the-shelf software as a service. And you will get to that point, but you have to go through this difficult development period first. And the comparison between the two is not favourable, because developing a product not from scratch but from scratch plus a little bit is significantly more costly. So that, that's part of the reason why we were reinforcing that in our report, is that it is a different project and therefore the cost profile and the risk profile is different. So the things that the project are doing to try and minimise the risk, to try and build up resourcing to support holding Infor's feet to the fire around quality, those are all good risk mitigation actions. How effective they are will play out in time. And there will probably be some other things that the project can do around the margins, but that key thing around not accepting poor quality from Infor as a trade-off for moving quickly will be a significant means of ensuring you get the quality product that you want before you go live.
Yeah, so to me, it's, I mean, apart from getting the scope right, and I can hear that there's going to be a life cycle cost because we're going to keep improving some sections of this. It's not all going to be perfect, but to me, the two things are the testing and the post-implementation support so that the people get their hands held, hyper-held for a period of time so that the thing actually gets adopted properly and with a positive attitude. Because it seems like it's line ball that we've got to get the attitude across the line through the support. So to me, those are the big deals. And it sounds like you've got them on your list and you're working on them. So I don't know if this committee can ask any more questions of any value at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think probably that's done project reboot. We do still have, we've got shovel ready update as well. So Nikki, thank you very much for joining us. Oh, sorry, not sure whether you caught that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, the committee's acknowledgement of the quality of the report. Very much appreciated.
Thank you. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak to it.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, thanks for your attention today around the Shovel Ready program. So page 121 of your agenda provides the latest program report that we've produced. And look, so we're getting to the end of year 2 of our delivery, and it's great to see some of the projects starting to wind down. And the program is focusing on making sure that the effort that's been put in by the team over the last couple of years is being acknowledged and celebrated. So you can see there we have a couple of our infrastructure projects in particular, which have produced some very good results. So great to be celebrating that. The program also had an opportunity to speak to the advisory board, which is looking after the national program of infrastructure work that's happening across the country. And so very positive engagement in that regard. And also a good opportunity to signal some of the challenges in the program that are coming at us, which I'll outline shortly. Of course, we do have another 3 years of the work program to deliver, and there are some challenges heading away, which are discussed briefly from a program level in the report that we've provided, along with some project-specific information. I mean, for me, the top 3 things are around budget, and in that regard, we have a couple of projects that are facing particular budget constraints. The vessel, which is around the expected increase in cost to deliver that particular project. And that particular challenge is, I guess, exaggerated by the fact that the funding isn't quite as straightforward as our infrastructure renewal project. So we'll have to tackle that one especially. We are heading towards a critical project hold point for that once we complete the procurement, or at least the tendering process for the construction. So we'll know a lot more about what's happening with that particular project. And the other one is we have had signalled that our fish passage pumps, which we're looking to install 5 of, we are looking at cost inflation in that regard. So again, we're having to navigate that particular challenge for those 5 projects that are coming up. What we have done in regards to those budget challenges is we are looking at signalling very early to MB around these challenges, so we can look at what options we have from a national funding point of view, as well as a regional funding point of view, so that once we do get to those project hold points, we can, I guess, hit the ground running with an options assessment to determine the best way forward for those projects. Time-wise, so a number of projects have faced delays particularly around COVID, supply chains, the kind of things that we hear a lot about these days. At this stage, we are expecting to deliver all our projects within the overall timeframe that has been set down by the government. However, what we are seeing is a lot more pressure being placed on the remaining years of the program. So that's something that's been very actively managed in terms of ensuring that we are resourced up and that our contractors are resourced up to deliver within that shorter timeframe. The third area that's really on my mind is around planting. And again, this is called out in a number of our restoration projects, particularly around the fact that we have had some climatic challenges. We've gone from an excessively dry period, which has cut into our planting season recently, to a very wet period now. So just looking at what that means, but also having to work very closely with a number of our plant suppliers. Our restoration projects are large. They involve a number of plants, both from commercial and community suppliers. And so we're having to work very hard with those suppliers to make sure that we continue to be able to deliver our promises within scope and time of what we've promised government. So at this stage, as I said, we are still expecting to meet those expectations, but it is taking a significant amount of work from the team to really actively manage those issues and risks that we have. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to leave it there. Obviously, we have our key project reference group this afternoon where there is a little bit more detail available, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Just an update for the rest of the committee. I know a bit about this, but I think it's useful. The vessel business case rests to a great degree on the income that it can generate, because it won't be just the lower Waikato that's actually a beneficiary. And the interest by the lower Waikato community is about the other parties that might hire the vessel. So there's been some work going on by staff and about getting some either letters of intent or indication of the amount of hire that this vessel can generate, because it's actually very significant in terms of looking at the cost benefit and the business case. So I'd like the staff just to update us on that side of the equation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the third-party use of the vessel was identified in the original business case for this. I think the general comment and feedback that I'm getting is it was quite a conservative estimate in terms of the amount of potential use of that vessel. It is certainly the work that's been done to design this vessel has identified that there are some quite significant operating constraints in terms of using a vessel on the river. And so this is quite a unique opportunity for a number of river users to really take advantage of what we provide. So what we are doing, it is a critical component of the business case. We do have a conservative estimate of use at the moment, but through the next month, we'll be specifically approaching those various users that we've identified to get a much better handle on what that use might look like in terms of hours, annual demand, that kind of thing. But really also to update those users on what the vessel will look like, the kind of parameters that we're going to be providing, the expected delivery date, so that they can also start to think about their own planning to really enable that use. The objective is to have a much better, it'll still be an estimate, so obviously we won't have any firm commitment from those organisations, but I think we have a much better estimate when we get to that project hold point and need to take a look at things like the cost benefit, the financial case for the vessel. Yeah, it is varied across the program. So every one of our funding agreements includes an element of delivering on social outcomes, and so therefore requires an element of social procurement to be undertaken. From the restoration program point of view, we're exceeding our targets across the board because of the nature of the work involved and the engagement of community groups and not only supplying but also planting our plants. The biggest challenge for us is in the infrastructure space because that is specialist work and it requires highly trained people. This is a national challenge. It's come through from every single council in the country around achieving the social procurement outcomes that were envisaged from the projects. But we are working nationally as well as regionally to really maximise what we can. We are doing well in terms of ensuring we're procuring locally. to achieve those social outcomes. But around some of the other, I guess, sub outcomes, it's proving to be more of a challenge because I guess we're not blessed with the I guess the range of options to successfully deliver those specialist projects, particularly in the infrastructure space.
Just take questions from absolutely. So presentation on that. So can we go straight to questions from the committee?
Congratulations on your accreditation.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make a comment. We've had building accreditation for this work for quite some years, and I just want to acknowledge the team, Owen in particular, and Hugh as the leader, and Brent as the director, just for the efforts they go to ensure this organisation can maintain the standards required. They are very, very high standards. And I just want to acknowledge what the staff do, and of course we provide this responsibility on behalf of all North Island regional councils. So there's a big reliance on this council to maintain its building control authority status, and in fact nationally, because I think the only other one in New Zealand as a regional council is Environment Canterbury, and it just only takes one of them to fall over, and we are the fallback for each other. Yes.
That's it.
Thank you.
I think when someone else speaks, you have to turn it on because you'll get feedback. So it's a bit of an on-off.
Okay, cool. Ready to go? So thank you, and appreciate there's been a few technical problems. So the report covers a number of topics today. We've got an update for you on the leaf balance management that we have been monitoring for the committee for quite some time. You'll note from the report there, we have seen a small increase over the last few months. Leave is seasonal, so we typically do see that as we head into the winter months. What we are noting, which is reassuring, is increasing leave being utilised, particularly as international borders have reopened. And we also see that the overall leave balance organisationally held is also being maintained. So although we have a small number of people with higher leave balances, our total leave balances are pretty consistent actually, which is reassuring. The report also covers the monitoring we do of leave blocks as a risk management or mitigation technique to ensure that where we have staff in critical roles, there is both the opportunity for those staff to get rest and recreation, which is important for their well-being, but also from a fraud management perspective, it reduces the likelihood of issues being undetected. We would capture in this particular report an update on our culture program also, I know a topic of some interest to this committee. We've run a number of culture surveys in recent years, the most recent at the end of 2021, early 2022, where we did note some gains in terms of the cultural rating for the organisation. They were relatively small, but in the context of a very disrupted couple of years, we were satisfied that they represented a reasonable progression for us. And finally, I've just updated both the COVID and the health and safety indicators as we typically report. In terms of the COVID illness absenteeism rate we're getting, we've had 141, I think, if I added up the extra one today, since February 2022, of people who have reported contracting COVID-19. Similar rates over the months, so we saw 48 in March, 40 in April, 31 in May, 11 month to date in June. So our levels appear moderate and are staying at a similar level month to month. And we feel the mitigation steps we've taken organisationally have been effective, with very little, if any, transmission within the workplace being reported. So I'll leave my verbal commentary at that in case there are questions. Thank you.
We have a mover and a seconder there. Oh.
Nick, the comment on health and safety indicators, I couldn't see anything in there about leading indicators. And we talked about it at the last council meeting, and I would have thought coming to an audit risk committee that the paucity of reporting on near misses, for example, would be something you'd be concerned about. I'm just wondering why, or have you gained comfort that you're on top of the near miss reporting now? Remember, we asked the chief executive what he was doing about it, and he gave us a very fulsome answer. That's my first question. My second question is executives. I'm assuming those are people that are either the CEO or L2s. Is that right? How many executives does the organisation have? 6. So 6 directors, 50% of them are on this list. How does that send a message? What sort of message does that send to our staff? And let me make the answer to that a bit easier. How many staff have been required under the Holidays Act since you last sat in front of us to take leave?
So in terms of requirement to take leave, we haven't resorted to instruction to take leave with any staff since I've last reported, primarily because we work with to reach agreement with staff to take leave when the balances get higher. So we negotiate timeframes with them, reach agreement over leave plans, and then booked into the system. The leave management to leave, of course, is one of those ones we have to be careful about. We need to get good and adequate breaks, and particularly for senior staff, I take the point, it's very important for them. We also look to make sure, though, that leave is taken at an appropriate time, so not to aggravate work or consequences for people in terms of returning to their work having been forced to take leave at an appropriate time. It is ongoing, those conversations, and as I mentioned earlier, the absolute numbers are very consistent and similar to previous years. That's not to say they're good numbers, but they haven't increased. And what we do know is that the limitations around travel in particular have impeded some travel plans for leave usage. And so what we try and do is keep the constant conversation happening with a focus on well-being. So get the leave that you need to refresh yourself. And from time to time, those conversations get more direct, but we haven't resorted to instructions to take leave. That was to answer your exact question. I think your other question was over the lead indicators and in particular the near-miss reporting. So we have seen increased near-miss reporting this month. And last month we saw 4, which still is insufficient from my perspective, but we're seeing the numbers increasing again. The health and safety team have been drilling into the reported incident rates. Incidents have gone into the system and reviewing those one by one. And they're also identifying just the misinterpretation really of what a near miss is relative to an incident. So we're correcting those as well. And we've got further plans to continue raising profile of near-miss reporting. So it is a real focus, and we expect the numbers to improve, and that's where the energy is going. We do have other lead indicators, of course. They include the auditing we do, the work around risk management, and the activity we're putting into the bow tie reviews, all of which are good lead indicators too.
I think, Chair, I really want to hear from the independents right about now, because in an organisation where 50% of the executives are on this list and 66% of them have time planned, one of 32 hours and one of 8 hours, what does that feel like to you? You comfortable with that?
Short side, I would say. Yes, and I take on board what, tone at the top is very important in terms of setting an example, and you can't expect the rest of the staff to follow leave expectations, the taking of it, if they don't do it at the top. It's one of those things I think you just need to constantly keep reinforcing and managing. And over COVID, it's been more difficult because people haven't, when they've been at home for long periods of time, they can't go anywhere. So it has been difficult. We're seeing similar patterns elsewhere. Or do you add anything?
I've been an executive in a company where 3 of our colleagues were killed in 1 year. And you have no idea the impact that has on an organisation. And for us to say that it's hard to travel and we can't go and ski in St. Moritz because the boundaries are blah blah, and we're a little bit busy and we can't create time. Frankly, it's not good enough, especially for the executives. It sets the wrong tone. If you guys think that we can go home tonight knowing that 313 hours leave balance for an executive member, I hope that person travels safe going home tonight, because I don't want to be in a position where we have to say to their family, oh, they didn't come home. Really, really sorry about that. It's, to me, I think, Chris, this is something that should be front and center of your mind, is the health and safety of your executives. And I know this is a very small indicator, but it is one indicator that comes in front of us. And I just want this committee to send the chief executive a very strong message. We're nervous about this. That's all.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, and look, thank you for showing the care and interest, not only in the executive, but in all staff. I just want to correct the stat. I think Nick was going to say there are 6 directors. There's also 2 other members of the executive who report to me, executive managers, and myself. So it's 9. So I just, I don't like to, I just want to make sure it doesn't look like it's a majority of the executive are in this position. It is something we take very seriously. I just have to be mindful, and this applies on the executive as well. There are things that happen in people's families, which means sometimes they cannot take leave, and it could exacerbate things. And I'm not going to go into any detail, but this happens throughout the organisation. There are many factors for sometimes why the leave isn't coming down. Everybody who's on over 240 hours needs to have a leave plan. Now, whether they can take it in the foreseeable period is another matter. As I say, there's individual circumstances with them all. I take your point that it's not a good look when those at the top aren't taking it. I mean, I'm trying to make a point of myself, but I'm keeping mine down for that very reason. And I know that some of the executive have taken leave in the last week, maybe 2 weeks, to try and get their leave balances down, and that probably doesn't show in these numbers here. But your point is well taken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I assume David Walker is still on the call. Yes, thanks, Fess. Members, happy to take the report largely as read. There's probably just two items to call out in particular. The first one is around the valuation of infrastructure assets, and this links directly with the audit plan anyway, and I think speaks to the economic context that we've heard about this morning, and the difficulty with actually trying to value these assets in the current environment. So in terms of where we're at the moment, there has been a desktop assessment of the indices since the last revaluation in December 2019, plus an estimate through to the 31st of March. That's indicating a total cumulative move of about 7%. But even in the last quarter, we know that things have moved significantly. I think what we see signalled through the audit plan is that reliance on the indices alone is not going to be sufficient. And so there is work underway to review work that has been undertaken over the last 12 months, look at unit rates, how they compare to the last time that we actually did a revaluation, to assess what sort of market movement there has been. And so that information will need to come back to you prior to the finalisation of the annual report. I have tried to context those movements around the materiality provisions that were indicated in last year's audit plan, and obviously are updated now around the degree of movement that I guess is accommodated within those. So that's a key area of uncertainty. And probably the other one is just around the leave, the employee entitlements and leave provisions, again, due to that wage growth versus inflationary pressures. So the assumptions are set out there in terms of how those entitlements have been currently valued. There is some sensitivity analysis that's been provided, but probably the comment to bring to your attention, just paragraph 39, around what, if any, impact salary growth rates may have on those provisions, with the advice being provided that with salary growth rates going up but inflation also going up, those two things may offset each other in terms of that overall valuation impact. So those are probably just a couple of call outs from me, but happy to take any questions from members or else in terms of the audit plan discussion as well.
So the indices have gone up, and that gives you a valuation increase. Is the discount rate gone up to the future? The discount rate applied to the future. You're just looking at
offset, which is the case with the way the
OCR is going. I would think the discount rate will be continuing to increase.
Give us a bit more buffer.
Question, if I may. I've got a quick question about section 30, and that's about the doubtful debt provision. I'm noticing that it's about a 6% change between that and the last year over the provision. I'm just wondering, given the information that we got earlier on as agenda, earlier, is our provision for doubtful debts, is that high enough? Are we on is there, the risk to me would appear to be greater, so I just want commentary on that.
Through Mr. Chair, I think reluctant. Through the Finance and Services Committee, we provide an update on outstanding debt greater than 3 months in terms of where there may be issues with payment or distress. That situation hasn't yet worsened, and I think our write-offs annually are actually really very, very minor. So I guess that's from a general debt perspective, and from a rate collection perspective, we've seen that performance being pretty consistent. There is slightly behind at the end of March, but the team have been turning their attention again to just debt follow-up.
I would doubt, Barry, it would
Be material.
Well, we hope.
Yes.
Do we have a date for the audit?
Sorry. Whereabouts is the language? Whereabouts is the judgment for unfunded mandates?
What do you?
So through you, Mr. Chair, that isn't an accounting estimate or judgment. Included in the annual report, as it will be in the annual plan document that you receive. So this is around balances in our financial statements and the assumptions that sit behind those, as opposed to implications on the work that the council does under a central government mandate without funding.
Okay, so therefore I can take from your answer that in this annual report that we're working on, there will be in bold a section that says unfunded mandates, and there'll be a because last time I asked this question, remember your answer. Not this year, next year.
So through Mr. Chair, I think my observations on this point has been that we need to capture the discussion around unfunded mandates through our planning cycles. So we understand when we're going into a year of where the work program that the council is having to respond to without the matching funding has been driven from. So we've picked that up for the annual plan. That can certainly guide some conversation.
Because the point I'm trying to make, Chair, is, albeit somewhat tongue-in-cheek, this paper is predicated on the government and accounting standards saying thou shalt report and they shall do this and make estimates and blah, 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 blah. But we get asked to do increasing volumes of work by the Crown for which they're not paying us. And some of it's going to be on the hustings in the short order. And I met with some of my constituents last night, and guess what? It came up. This government is asking you to do more and more of their dirty work. Let's not call it that, but I think I'm looking forward to some commentary and hopefully a number in the annual report that says, here's the amount of money we've had to do, here's the amount of money, ratepayers' money we've had to spend so we can get a job done for the Crown.
That's not a function.
ask you to keep it short and just speak to anything which needs to be brought to our attention.
Sorry, Graham, you're looking at the camera. Was that for me? There was a time delay in that question.
Oh, sorry, we're having some sound difficulties today, so you'll have to make allowances. I'm sorry. I just said we're under the pump for time, and just can you keep any comments on your audit plan short? But I think one thing we're all interested in is the lack of dates for when the audit will be undertaken.
Sure, Chair. Yes, I'm not surprised. We still operate a central resourcing model. Government and the listed entities are in the process of being resourced at the moment. That really takes us to the end of September. My expectation is that the timing is going to be very similar to last year, and effectively until the listed entities and government have been buttoned down, we aren't allocated resources. So at this point, I'm not able to confirm dates, but my expectation is that it's going to be very similar to last year.
The audit was conducted on time last year, and as I understand it, Audit New Zealand shed a significant amount of work to enable them to be on time. Has it been unsuccessful?
No, a lot has been shed, but there is obviously a process that goes through. For example, we had to complete all the 21 work. 21 work is in fact still being completed. There's some entities that haven't had their 21 audits completed yet, and so we will only see the impact of that when we get into the 22 year. It is an ongoing process.
Any point going any further, really? Andrew, do you want to make a comment?
Well, I sit on a few audit and risk committees, and this is the first time I'm in front of a plan where there's no hours estimated and no money mentioned. I'm just wondering why that is.
That's because that's done 3 yearly.
And this is just the annual document.
Have they firmed up on what the price is going to look like this year?
The
Contract, yeah.
Well, how much has it gone up? Because every year they want it to go up.
Through you, Chair, there is an annual plan. There is an APL, an order proposal letter, which from memory is in place, which is why you haven't got a separate letter for that.
How much?
How much? You recall?
Can I ask? I don't have it in front of me. It'll take, you're short of time, it'll take some time. I can look it up, but I'll provide that information to Janine. Janine will have a copy of the letter.
So
I'd like
it's
to know how much and what the increase.
recollection, the fee from last year was about 149,000. It's in that order of magnitude. I guess it's clarity whether there's a, what the CPI adjustments would be, given that's normally been a driver of change for those audit fees as well.
The only driver. Or problems.
David, thank you. I think we've finished on this topic.
Chair, I was going to, okay, there will be a reception.
Yes. It is.
Janine, can you hear me? Janine? Hello? Janine, can you hear me?
So do we still need to push a button when we speak because there's externals listening?
Yes, that's right, Joe. But it's just the sound of the speaker coming into the room, which is the issue, because this decided to cut down on that. So the same, nothing's changed as far as you speaking out. It's just the speakers externally coming into the room, which Jess could possibly set up.
Is David still wanting to talk? I thought he was going to come back to us. Yes, well, I think that.
David, do you have any final comments that you wish to add?
Can you hear me?
Just.
I think with the poor reception, I can hear you with an echo. So I think let's just leave it. I think it's going to be difficult.
Yes, I think so too. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just the 2 points to note under this report. So the updated procurement policy is provided for your information and feedback. So happy to take that in detail. And we have also just noted the upcoming bill around the protected disclosures, protection of whistleblowers bill, which extends some of the scope in relation to whistleblowers to include bullying and harassment in particular. So we will need to reflect these changes through into our protected disclosures whistleblower policy, which we will do and then bring back to you.
Do you have any comments on the procurement policy? I think you do.
Yeah, I think it's a good policy. Obviously, it's expanded to reflect the sort of broader view of procurement. I noticed there's a comment there's a section 7 on page 201, which relates to health and safety requirements, and this in turn refers to a further document, which is the WRC Health and Safety Management Procedures 4104.483. Click here, which I was unable to do being outside the system. But I felt as if the health and safety probably deserves a slightly stronger commentary here. While I agree that we shouldn't get into any detail on a policy of this nature,
I believe that it would be appropriate to specify that any contract, purchase order or other agreement procured requires the council, the other party to communicate, cooperate and to coordinate in respect of health and safety, which is a statutory requirement. And also some mention of our requirement to do due diligence of risks, which in many cases, for many of our counterparties would be a pre-qualification process through the Waikato LAS or some other process. Now again, because there's so many different classes of procurement, I don't think it should be specified, but the principle of a process of due diligence, I think, could be, so as to set the tone for the procurement, if you like. That was my comment. And I provided it to the team earlier, so they're not clear.
I agree. I think this is something that should be highlighted, and I think it could be incorporated quite easily in the policy without a substantial rewrite.
Sorry, guys.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I have provided full feedback to the team, and they have come suggested wording which, in terms of the 3 C's, contract managers need to ensure that all parties are responsible for meeting the respective health and safety obligations at law, and must, as far as reasonably practicable, consult, cooperate, coordinate activities with each other, contractors or other parties. So that and some minor changes suggested around the due diligence aspects as well, in terms of the requirement to follow the procedures set out and those supporting rules.
That's cool.
Any other questions from committee members? If they're not, can we have a mover and a seconder for the resolution, please?
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Paul. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you. Which brings us to the end of the open agenda. And so we need a resolution to go on to the public. I move.
Do you want us to check out this meeting?
Check out, don't we?
Do we have to leave this meeting?
No,
Alright, so we'll go around with this is
This for external. Yes, external.
Yeah.
Right, this is Andrew and Barry.
Aye.